Welcome to Unit 14, AntiVirus 1984, Level 0. This will be probably the largest program that you make at this point in time. It's pretty big, so let's go ahead and get to work. Let's check this thing out in Scratch. Okay, let me put on Scratch here. So what we're dealing with here is a program that has multiple sprites. You'll actually be programming on the stage. Let's see, oh, those are notes. I don't need this kind of stuff. I'll delete that for you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time walking through the code because the presentation has all this information already put inside of it, and there's a lot of details as you go through the code. But let me quickly show you what happens in the program when we run it. So we'll have this computer right up here. We're going to have these viruses attacking the computer, and whenever they get near the computer and actually touch it, you'll notice that I use some of let me turn the volume off. Changing the size so they shrink down to make it look like they go inside, and then I change the image of this sprite of the computer, and now you have this gun kind of turret, which is your antivirus software that goes around and shoots the viruses as they come in. Okay, and these are actually not real computer viruses; they're just something I drew just based upon my limited knowledge of viruses, and that's all there's to it. Okay, what you'll see is that we have these little bars up here that measure the update, or excuse me, the upload, because you're uploading files to the internet, and then we're measuring the infection rate. And I'm using the pen tool to draw those on the screen, and you'll notice that we have some special effects of how the changing of the level shows up on the screen, and then the gun can shoot these ones and zeros. I may look like, you know, it's like machine code, like binary. Now you notice there's an error here in the program. I'm going to challenge you with fixing that error. I have the solution, but I started putting in the instructions, and I thought, you know what, that's probably a good learning lesson for them to be able to go through and figure it out. It's not so difficult on trying to figure out how to fix that error. What's difficult is trying to make it very simple, if that makes any sense. Okay. The solution is much simpler than it appears to be, okay, because what's happening is it's a timing issue with the program, and as you go through the instructions and complete it, you'll see that there's opportunities to make this code more efficient and more timely. And I'll give you a little bit of hint here as to what's going on. Oh yeah, the boss, I forgot about that. Okay, so we got a boss sprite. Let's kill that guy. We don't like this big virus. It makes me feel like I'm getting a cold or something. Okay, so, you know, what in the world was I talking about? I got confused. Oh yeah, so the solution to that little, see, there's the error. It doesn't explode, okay, and it's not anything to do with the actual code. It's a timing issue, and I hate to say this, and this is probably one of the few times I'll say it, I would say this probably has something to do with Scratch on the way the code interprets the blocks that you put out here. It's kind of a timing issue. The solution I have actually runs much more efficient, but the instructions whenever I put it on the screen was a little bit hard to read by putting that code. So anywho, I digress. So right here, the computer, this bad boy, that's actually a Tandy computer. I think the nickname for it was a Trash 80. I was in elementary school when those were being used. My school didn't have those. We had one Apple IIe computer for the entire school when I was in elementary school. So we didn't have a computer lab when I was in elementary school like you all. So we were lucky if we got maybe 5 to 10 minutes on the computer our entire school year. So hopefully you get a little bit more time. So there's a lot of code going on here with the different pieces that's taking place. I'm going to show you how to program the different parts of this program, but you'll also notice that I don't show you everything. For example, here's virus 0. Okay, so I can get the code organized. Let me just clean it up. So there's all the code for virus 0, and you'll be challenged with having to figure out how to program virus 1. Virus 1 operates the same way. Okay, now don't pay attention to the fact that the code is not as the same organization. It's the same scripts. It's just that we're dealing with some different broadcast messages and different variables for virus 1. And the same with the boss. Okay, we only have one boss, but you can make multiple bosses. Matter of fact, you could design your own boss and change it up on how it operates, okay? And it can do different things. I had a lot of big plans for this, but I started realizing that the code was getting a little bit more complicated for this level of instruction, so I had to tone it back a little bit. Another thing is that whenever we shoot our sprites, it's the same projectile projectile strategy. I don't say code because it does operate a little bit differently, just because it has a little bit more details here. But you can see that we expanded the amount of conditions it checks, but pretty much it's the same thing. But the big difference is that whenever we shoot our projectile, we have an explosion take place. The explosion is a separate sprite, and I just made it its own object for the explosion to just help control the code, and also to teach you a little bit about object-oriented programming, because by having the explosion as a separate piece of code, I can actually delegate the that's my phone, somebody likes me. Okay, so I can delegate that responsibility for the explosion to a totally separate sprite instead of actually having to worry about all this, you know, embedded inside of one single sprite with multiple images on here. And you can see from the explosion that I go through quite a few costume changes to make that explosion take place. And you're probably thinking, well, hey, why don't we just put a loop in here that loops through the number of costumes as it changes? And you know what, that probably would have worked, okay? However, this works too, and this is what I did, so we're just going to go ahead and stick with that. There's a lot of different strategies. One of the strategies was that, I don't know, I just felt like this was a good use of some repetition of getting used to it. Now, if you want to, whenever you start duplicating this stuff, and you program Explosion 2, you'll notice that you can just, you know, copy and paste the code over to it. Explosion 2 will primarily deal with the explosion for the boss whenever that's blowing up. And let's see, what else did I forget? Sorry, I had to stop the program. I'm going to start back up so you can see the game over message. So the Explosion 2 ray right here, actually I don't think the game can even end on the first level. I don't think it can affect it that quickly. Okay, so the Explosion 2, I remember what I did here with this one. This one is focused primarily on the boss, and the reason is that having these numbers right here with the explosion attacking so many different viruses, as you'll see here in a second, having a separate sprite dedicated to the boss explosion just made a little bit more sense, especially since on the Explosion 2 for the boss, it has its own separate little mini explosion, and you'll see that once we destroy the actual boss. Let's see, I think I'll be able to get infected here. Okay, so you can see the game over sign. So whenever the boss explodes, there it is, game over. Okay, so it does actually end. Okay, so yes, the boss will explode. Oh, the little dots going around the screen in the background, I just put that in there to add some visual imagery. I use this nested if-else loops. Oh, look at that, random numbers. This looks familiar, doesn't it? Okay, now here's one thing I have done on my code. I left this bottom else section open. Okay, this is not a good programming technique. Yeah, if you get a job and you do this, you're probably not going to make your boss very happy. However, we're here for educational purposes, and by leaving this open, nothing's going to happen if it comes down here and it's blank. Okay, the dot just won't go, no big deal. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could plug this other nested, I can nest this if-else block right here if I want to. And you notice I left this one blank too. I did this for portability, so that way I can just keep adding these as I wanted to give some different options on how something moves around the screen. And I want to show that to you also because I didn't want you to say, oh, what the heck is this guy teaching? This is horrible programming knowledge. Okay, but I wanted you to see is like by leaving this open, I avoid the situation where I have to go back and do a lot of reprogramming with dragging and dropping, because Scratch, as simple it is to get started, when you start getting complex, it actually becomes very burdensome with the code, just due to the nature of the blocks of having to drag them around. It's not as easy as something that you would type on the screen, which is ironic. But anyhow, so I left that open just so it'd be easy to drag these in here if I wanted to expand it. And I wanted you to see that in case you want to do something like this in the future with anything else. Level message, let's see, what does that do? Oh, yes, this is just going to bring the next level message up on the screen. You can see through the costumes here. I left the first one blank just for level 1, and then it just cycles through it. There's probably been a better way to actually have this automated, but I just went ahead and typed it out so that way I could go all the way through. And if you get to level 17 with the way I programmed it, you're pretty good at this game. The upload signs, these are just simple sprites that sit up here, but what happens is I drew 2 different markers. When you start the program, you'll see we have the upload background, which is the black line appearing, and then I have the upload mark appears, and it's slowly being drawn across the screen as it goes across. And then we have the infection marker, and this is also drawn right there as well. Now the infection background, if you notice the sprite is black. Sorry about that, I had to pause the video, I pressed the wrong button on my keyboard. Okay, so the sprite for the infection background is black right here. However, remember the pen color is set to yellow. That's what creates the yellow background, okay? I just copied the same size of the sprite image for the costume, which is right here, 7x7, from this one right over here that's also 7x7, just to keep some consistency. Okay, and that is all there is to it. Let's see what else. I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory once you go through the code. The viruses, just kind of give you some idea on what's taking place here. Whoa, I almost gave a secret away on how to make this very, very, very fast and get rid of that error. But I will give you a hint here, okay? So whenever this sprite receives the virus zeros information, it goes all the way through this code, which you can go through and decipher that and read the instructions. Then it broadcasts this message right here, virus 0 motion, which starts this block of code. It goes all the way through this right here. You've seen this before. If you haven't, go back through some of the other lessons. You can probably figure out what's taking place right here. Okay, a little bit of details, but again, read the instructions. Once we get to this broadcast message, we're sending a message to this block of code to complete this particular script right here. And once we get down to the bottom, no matter what happens, okay, you'll notice we don't stop the script at all. Okay. Once we get down to the bottom right here, we broadcast this message called virus 0, and it takes us all the way back to this point right here, and we restart this entire process again and again and again. Okay. The only thing that stops it from actually keep going is whenever we hit this point right here in this if condition by telling it to stop this script if the upload is equal to 100, and we stop the script, which stops this message from getting sent and the sprite's hidden. So it basically turns off any other type of code that might be running in the sprite until this message gets sent again. And virus 0, let's see, gets sent from 2 places. One right here when the game starts, and another whenever the next level function right here gets initiated. Then we send out that virus 0 broadcast message right there, which starts it again. Okay, and the virus 0 message is going to come from, where'd that go? You know what, I'm going to show you something real quick. Okay, so next level, let's find out who sends this. Show senders, so it's right down here, upload complete. You have to understand, I made this program 4 years ago, so I kind of forgot some of the details. So next level is sent from this particular sprite right here. So this piece of code, once it receives the message upload complete, which where does this one come from? Right over here. You can see it comes from right here, which is the upload marker. Okay, so that's a quick little tool on how to trace your way around with all the different broadcast messages. I show you that in Unit 18 in a little bit more detail, but I might as well show it to you right now in the video just to help speed up the process, because that's what we're here for, to make sure we learn quickly and effectively. Okay, so that is the program. Let's go and double check the presentation. We're combining everything we learned from Unit 13, some advanced animation sequences. You saw that with the explosions and the viruses as they run across the screen. We talked a little bit about recursion in the mini lessons. Recursion, technically, you could say it's a recursive loop of the way the virus goes through broadcasting amongst itself. Now, there's a way to make this much more efficient. I'm going to let you figure that out, okay? The code will work much better if you figure out how to combine all this together right here, okay? There's a hint for you. So this explains a little bit about recursion. Benefits, it's like you can keep reusing a function over and over again, which you saw, it gives us that ability to keep repeating it. Some negatives is that it can get out of control, and it's difficult to learn to keep thinking that a function keeps calling itself over and over again. Okay, so that's just something to think about as well. And don't mind the fact that we're using a broadcast message, especially if you're a computer scientist and you're like, well, that's not the definition of recursion. We're just keeping it simple just to get the mentality. Let's see, here's all your lesson files. You'll need all of these. They'll come with the file that you get from your teacher or from the website called AntiVirus 1984 Level 0. And if you have all this, you should be good to go. Feel free to explore and elaborate and change things up once you get these images on the screen and you want to change things, add stuff. I'd really encourage you to make a new boss for your game, do something a little bit different. Look through the different lessons with this in the instructions to give yourself some challenges on how to really expand this game, because you can really do some cool stuff with this. All right, good luck, and we'll see you in Unit 15.